Friends, how are we doing? I know, a lot has happened. On just this past Saturday, July 13th, I was driving to a music gig when my phone started blowing up with two words: Trump shot. My heart sank, and even though it was unsafe, yes, I did check Twitter, and sure enough, there it was. A video that will forever live in infamy. Chills ran down my spine. I knew how significant this moment was, and I knew that it would change the course of the political landscape forever. My mind was racing and spiraling out of control. Who did this? What was their motive? And I knew that the internet would rush to judgment despite having so little information. In my mind's eye, honestly, I saw two narratives emerging. One side would say that this was a Marxist liberal motivated by their hate for Trump, and the left is to blame for all of this. And the other side would say this was definitely staged to make Trump look more like a martyr and a hero. Well, sure enough, within minutes, these narratives were all over social media. It has been a wild few days, and almost everyone is dealing with some level of fear and anxiety, myself included. We've been at a boiling point for years now, and an assassination attempt could very well be the moment where it boils over. So, we gotta talk about it. What do we actually know so far about what happened? What will the impact of this be for the outcome of the election in November? Far-right media pundits and Christian nationalists blame the media and the left for the assassination attempt. Are they right? Meanwhile, some people seem to be okay publicly saying they wish the shooter didn't miss. I'll explain why I believe that is not only morally outrageous, but how it would only make everything so much worse. For people who claim allegiance to the way of Jesus, how do we respond in a cultural and historic moment that is ripe with chaos, confusion, and division? There are a lot of layers here. So let's get into it. And of course, don't forget to hit that like button and give me your thoughts in the comments as we go along. First, let's just get what we know out and on the table. On Saturday, former President Trump was at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. About 11 minutes into his speech, there was a series of gunshots, and Trump grabbed his right ear. Within seconds, the Secret Service jumped on top of Trump as more gunshots rang out. Trump got up, the crowd roared, and with a bloody face, Trump put his fist up and mouthed the words "fight," which electrified the crowd, and this iconic photo was taken. Within minutes, he was in a car and escorted off the premises. Here's an unedited video of the entire situation unfolding.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Move to the spare. Hold. When you're ready. On you.
Ready?
Move.
Up.
Move. Go.
Up. Hawkeye's here.
Hawkeye's here. Move it to the spare.
Spare, get ready. Spare, get ready.
We ready?
Down. Down.
Are we good?
Shooter's down.
Shooter's down. Are we good to move?
Down. We're good to move.
Clear.
We're
Let's
clear.
move.
We're clear.
Let's move.
We're clear.
Come on.
Let me get my shoes. Let me get my shoes.
Got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes, sir.
Hold that in your head, it's bloody.
So we gotta move to the bus. Move to the bus. Let me get my shoes.
Okay. My shoes down. My shoe.
Watch out.
Wait.
I gotta be honest, watching that video, again, it still brings up a lot of emotions in me. Violence is deplorable, and it only breeds more violence. And violence between humans starts with dehumanization. This is why, within an hour of this happening, we released the following statement on all of our socials. Since day one, the new evangelicals have stood against dehumanization because we believe that all people are made in the image of God. We condemn the violence that happened to former President Trump at his rally. Actions like these only fuel cycles of chaos that bring hell on earth for us all. A better path forward must be rooted in nonviolence and love for all of our neighbors. So we posted that on social media, and the reason we did is because this is a non-negotiable for us. It's a core value that we live by, non-dehumanization. And because it's a value, we don't get to pick and choose who it's applied to. The value of non-dehumanization is what tells us that the legacy of racism in America is wrong and must be corrected. It's what tells us that signing checks to fund the ongoing extermination of the Palestinian people is wrong and must be stopped. It's what tells us that violence against our queer neighbors is abhorrent. And it tells us that trying to assassinate a former president is wrong no matter who they are or what the motive is. As of this recording, here's what I know so far, and these details could change. The shooter was a 20-year-old male, I'm not going to name him, and was perched on a rooftop about 160 yards away with an AR-15 style rifle that his father bought legally. According to numerous news outlets, while the shooter was a registered Republican, on the day President Biden was sworn into office, he made a $15 contribution to a progressive political action committee. We don't know the motive at this time, but we will definitely be keeping our eye out, and if anything new arises, we'll make sure to include it in our next video. Now, according to friends, the shooter tried out for his high school rifle team, but didn't make the cut because he was a bad shot, which in this case, thank God he was. He was quiet and reserved, and former classmates attest that he was bullied at school. He was killed by return fire from a Secret Service sniper shortly after the shooting. When the police recovered his body, he was wearing a t-shirt from a popular YouTube channel called Demolition Ranch. It's a gun and explosives channel with over 11 million subscribers. We also know that after the dust settled, not only was Trump wounded, but so were 3 others. One of them did not survive. His name was Corey Comparatore, and I'll let Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro share the story with you.
We lost a fellow Pennsylvanian last night, Corey Comparatore. I just spoke to Corey's wife and Corey's 2 daughters. Corey was a girl dad. Corey was a firefighter. Corey went to church every Sunday. Corey loved his community. And most especially, Corey loved his family. Corey was an avid supporter of the former president and was so excited to be there last night with him in the community. I asked Corey's wife if it would be okay for me to share that we spoke, and she said yes. She also asked that I share with all of you that Corey died a hero, that Corey dove on his family to protect them last night at this rally. Corey was the very best of us. May his memory be a blessing.
Look, I'm a dad, okay? There isn't anything I wouldn't do for my kids. Corey gave the ultimate sacrifice by throwing his body over his family so they could live. Violence destroys so much. Not only will that family never be the same, the impact of what this shooter did will have permanent and lasting effects on the families and people who attended the rally and on the country. How did this happen? The response by the sniper team seemed delayed. Security experts are saying that this was a colossal failure and must be investigated, and it seems that President Biden agrees. Less than 24 hours after the shooting, Biden ordered an independent review be done and that security be enhanced not only for the Trump campaign, but also at the Republican National Convention, which is happening this week. Now look, at this point, it is totally fair to say that we have way more questions than answers. And so with this stage set, I want to address a few of the elephants in the room relevant to the topics this channel and organization routinely talks about. So here we go. The first elephant that we have to talk about is that America has a gun violence problem. It's killing our children, it's killing our adults, and more guns on the streets and more people carrying weapons, especially AR-15 style ones, does not fix the problem. The mantra that a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun is propaganda, because despite there being hundreds of good guys with guns at this rally, they still weren't able to stop the bad guy with the gun before he killed a man, wounded two others, and was within millimeters of assassinating a former president on live television. So I really hope people who advocate for unfettered gun access had a wake-up call. But to be honest, I'm not hopeful. If some of our politicians won't change their mind after school shootings like Sandy Hook or Uvalde, I sadly do not think a former president being assassinated will deter them either. The gun lobby is powerful and it's killing people. We need serious gun reform now, and I know the propaganda right-wing media and politicians push in response because I grew up hearing it for most of my life. They tell blatant untruths that the left wants to take away all of your guns, when in reality, most Americans are asking for and are in favor of what are known as common sense gun regulations and the banning of assault-style rifles, which are the preferred gun of choice for mass shootings. And that makes sense to me. We don't allow people to carry machine guns, bazookas, grenade launchers. We have regulations, and those regulations should extend to weapons that mass shooters prefer. Okay. The next elephant in the room we need to address is the danger of conspiratorial thinking about the assassination attempt. And here's what I mean by that. It is totally normal to have questions in light of something that appears so unbelievable. It's perfectly reasonable to wonder, are there forces behind the scenes who orchestrated all of this? Is this really what the media often refers to as the actions of a lone wolf? Look, we got to be honest here. Our government is often not truthful, and it's done some pretty terrible things that seem unbelievable and have involved actual conspiracies. Remember the war on drugs? Well, the assistant of domestic affairs to the president of Richard Nixon admitted that the war on drugs was racially and politically motivated, saying, quote, "You want to know what this war on drugs was really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And of course, how can we forget about the Iraq War? Being told over and over again about weapons of mass destruction that never actually existed. So I get it. People are going to have their questions and suspicions of the government. I have them too. That's totally reasonable. But there's a world of difference between asking good faith questions and making blatantly unproven declarations like, it was definitely staged. Where is your evidence? Suspicions, no matter how justifiable, are not proof, and making definitive claims without evidence is not helpful. I don't care if you identify as a progressive or if you think Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to democracy. You don't help the cause when you say unsubstantiated things like that. You just don't. I'm sorry. You just do not help anyone by saying those things. Be suspicious, but can we also be slower to proclaim certainty? It's only been 4 days. Can we be measured? Because believe me, there are enough terrible and uninformed takes, which leads me to my next elephant that we have to address. I have seen some of the shittiest theological takes maybe in my life shortly after the assassination attempt. Here is one example. Charlie Kirk tweeted, "Consider for a moment that Donald Trump and the fortunes of the entire country might have been saved today by a gust of wind that pushed the bullet ever so slightly. The Holy Spirit in Scripture is often associated with a gust of wind. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting." Acts 2:1-3. God's hand is on Donald Trump. Wow, Charlie, that's quite the take. And maybe you're thinking to yourself that this is low-hanging fruit because Charlie Kirk isn't a theologian, but instead he's a political pundit who uses Christian theology to advance a particular agenda. Well, how about the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, Al Mohler, a man regarded by millions of people as a leading conservative theologian whose podcast routinely hits the top of the podcast charts? He tweeted, The reality of God's providence is something many Americans and no doubt many Christians think about with far too little seriousness. I dare ask, how do you look at yesterday's events in Butler, Pennsylvania and see it all merely as a lucky miss? Really, Al? Wow. Okay, so to be clear, if it was God's providence that is responsible for the bullet missing Trump, it would also be God's providence, or lack of providence, that a bullet hit Corey, killing him as he shielded his wife and daughter. Sorry, that's not a good God. And notice how this theology is designed to give divine authority to their political strongman. Trump has the hand of God on him because the bullet missed. This reinforces the narrative that Trump is being used by God to advance a Christian agenda, and that people who oppose Trump are actually opposing God. Scott Coley, in his book, Ministers of Propaganda, calls this a legitimizing narrative, which he defines as a story meant to explain the moral legitimacy of the social hierarchy in question. For years, we have seen Trump be propped up as some type of messiah figure by white evangelicals in both subtle and direct ways. There was, of course, the infamous gold statue made of Trump at CPAC 2021, and when 10 Republicans sided with Democrats to impeach Trump after the January 6th insurrection, Franklin Graham compared it to Christ being betrayed by Judas. I'm not kidding. Those are some of the more subtle ways that Trump has been compared to or seen as a messiah figure, but there have also been direct correlations, such as books titled President Donald J. Trump, the Son of Man, the Christ, and Christ Trump, Persecution of a Man, that paint Trump as a new messiah figure that has come after Christ. And of course, how can we forget popular pseudo-theologian Eric Metaxas? And no, I don't mean when he declared Jesus was white. Wow, Eric. But when he posted, and I shit you not, this picture right after Trump's criminal conviction, which says, if you're not sure you can vote for a convicted criminal, remember you worship one, with a picture of Trump's mugshot on the left and a picture of white crucified Jesus on the right. And I beg you, I beg you, before you write off my evidence as selective, you need to know that Eric Metaxas not only has a massive social media presence, he speaks at right-wing events all the time. I've met him in person. He's also platformed and represents the views of thousands of right-wing Christians all over the place. There are, of course, also countless memes and pictures and sermons that all demonstrate how Trump is truly seen, at a minimum, as being chosen by God, but in many cases also portrayed as a messiah sent by God. These are legitimizing narratives designed to maintain hierarchies that benefit the people employing them. And the truth does not matter here. Trump is not a messianic figure comparable to Jesus for obvious reasons. Just read the Sermon on the Mount. But for many, Trump is not only a physical representation of the Jesus they believe in, but also he's sent by God, and God approves of the work that Trump is doing. That approval reinforces and legitimizes the narrative that God is on their side and is calling them to order a society according to their hierarchies. I know they'll claim they're just being biblical, but that's a Trojan horse for many reasons. With this legitimizing narrative in place that they represent the will of God, whoever opposes them is therefore on the side of the enemy, which in evangelical Christianity is Satan, who wants to seek and destroy God's people and all they stand for. The entire worldview hinges on the dehumanization of other people to bolster their base. And that brings me to the most important elephant that needs to be pointed out. Two things can be true at the same time. An attempted assassination attempt of a former president is wrong and should be condemned no matter who it is. And at the same time, this changes nothing about the real threat Trump and the MAGA movement are to democracy and our neighbors. Period. In fact, if anything, this just made the MAGA movement even more dangerous, because if there's anything movements like this thrive on, it's a persecuted leader. The terrible assassination attempt will only further bolster the notion that Trump is a martyr who took a bullet for his followers. You also can't help but see the connection many are going to make between Jesus being nailed to a cross for their sins and Trump taking a bullet for their rights. And perhaps the most frustrating outcome of this situation is that right-wing media is going to use it as propaganda that the mainstream media and Democrats are to blame. And we'll come back to that. But the reason I call it propaganda is because the world of MAGA and Christian nationalism, often one and the same by the way, does not have a value of non-dehumanization themselves. They have a value of spinning everything into a narrative that benefits them, and they have no problem employing selective outrage and dehumanization whenever it's needed. For example, Right after the assassination attempt, major Democratic leaders came out with swift condemnation of the violence and well wishes for Trump. President Biden himself reiterated several times that violence is unacceptable, and he also called Trump personally to wish him a fast recovery. Senator Chuck Schumer wrote, "I am horrified by what happened at the Trump rally in Pennsylvania and relieved that former President Trump is safe. Political violence has no place in our country." AOC wrote, "There is no place for political violence, including the horrific incident we just witnessed in Pennsylvania. It is absolutely unacceptable and must be denounced in the strongest terms. My heart goes out to all the victims, and I wish the former president a speedy recovery." And Nancy Pelosi wrote, "As one whose family has been the victim of political violence, I know firsthand that political violence of any kind has no place in our society. I thank God that former President Trump is safe. As we learn more details about this horrifying incident, let us pray that all those in attendance at the former president's rally today are unharmed." Now, compare Nancy Pelosi's response to how Trump and his son, Don Jr., responded when Paul Pelosi, Nancy's husband, was attacked by an intruder with a hammer yelling, "Where's Nancy?" And this intruder, while on trial, admitted that he was motivated by conspiracy theories and right-wing media to stop the corruption in Washington, leading him to commit a terrible act of violence. Well, shortly after that attack, Don Jr. retweeted an image of white underwear with a hammer on top that had a caption saying, "Got my Paul Pelosi costume ready," with Don Jr. adding his own commentary saying, "The internet remains undefeated. Also, if you switch out the hammer for a red feather boa, you could be Hunter Biden in an instant." And Trump himself made light of the politically motivated attack at a rally, saying this:
Together we will take on the ultra-left-wing liars, losers, creeps, perverts, and freaks who are devouring the future of this state like a swarm of locusts. And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
See, it's not really about a value of respecting the worth of all human life. Trump, his son, and the MAGA world have spent the last 8 years spewing violent and objectively hateful rhetoric aimed at their political opponents. And when violence that is influenced by right-wing media breaks out, they take no responsibility for their actions. On May 16th, 2022, a man opened fire at a supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York, killing 10 people and wounding 3 others. The man was motivated by racial hatred, and his sick manifesto cited fear of the Great Replacement, which is a conspiracy theory that has historically been advocated by KKK leaders such as David Duke, that American citizens, code for white people, are being replaced by foreigners. And yet, this same sentiment is openly endorsed in right-wing spaces today. I talked about this last year when I went to America Fest hosted by Turning Point USA. Here's what I said. And this brings us to a major talking point espoused at the event that should truly concern us: the Great Replacement Theory. This is a conspiracy theory that says there are forces at work that are intentionally flooding our borders with non-white immigrants to destroy the fabric of our society. Who is behind this? The deep state? Some secret cabal? The liberals? Cultural Marxism? Who knows, honestly? But it exists, and it's happening. And no, I'm not lying when I tell you this was out in the open.
Greatest cities in America.
Oh, yeah.
And it is the perfect example of the Great Replacement. A city that was safe and was peaceful, and then you bring in a bunch of third worlders that don't share our values with tolerance, and it gets destroyed. There's a couple topics I want to keep diving into here, and one of them is the people who should be most against this importation of Muslims into our country.
Charlie was talking about Minneapolis here, and the first thing you should know is that Minneapolis doesn't even crack the top 10 or 15 most dangerous city lists. And the second thing you should know is that a study done by the Cato Institute revealed that in 2018, native-born citizens were twice as likely to commit a crime, including sex crimes, than undocumented immigrants. And this is a good example of how much I heard was just propaganda. And it's effective because the audience doesn't know enough to challenge it and believes everything that is said from the stage. And I need to say that the Great Replacement theory has deep roots in white supremacy. David Duke, a former Grand Wizard of the KKK, praised Tucker Carlson in 2021 for talking about the replacement theory on his show, saying in part, quote, "Tucker Carlson is talking about replacement theory. Well, I knew it was going on way back then, way back in 1991. If you've ever wondered how groups like the KKK grew to millions of members, you should know that its rhetoric lives on in big organizations that also attract millions of people today."
Joe Biden's 5 million illegal aliens are on the verge of replacing you.
The government of this country is on course to replace us with non-Europeans, non-white people.
And coming from all over the world, they're also replacing your culture.
All the people coming in, it's even affecting the culture of the country.
That's right, they want you to disappear.
We need to actually get up and fight for the white race, or there ain't gonna be no white race.
They care more about the illegal immigrants at the border than they do the American people. They're giving out handouts to them.
Our country just don't care about us Americans. It's all about a handout to all the illegal immigrants.
If you're white, you have to go to the back of the line, discriminating against white people.
There is racial discrimination going on right now in this country against massive numbers of white Americans.
Anti-racist is a whole weird ideology that, quite frankly, tries to make white people second-class citizens.
White Americans are being treated as second-class citizens.
There are now two standards of justice.
It's a dual system of justice.
The foreign-born population is now growing by 132,000 people every month.
The non-whites are reproducing rapidly.
Eventually, there will be no more native-born Americans.
Our people are having few children. We've got to start protecting our race.
How precisely is diversity our strength?
So how is diversity our strength?
Now, has there been any calls to tone down the rhetoric from within the right-wing media and MAGA world? No, of course not. We can give countless examples of extreme rhetoric that has led to extreme outcomes by the far right, and despite the outcomes causing violence, they instead deflect or ignore or downright lie about their complicity. Two examples really stick out here. First is the entire persona of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, really, we could make an entire video on her and the things that she said, but this is a woman who is well platformed in the Christian nationalist world. She is a regular on the right-wing media speaking circuit, including at events like Turning Point's America Fest, and she's also spoken at events hosted by, get ready, Hitler-praising, Holocaust-denying, openly racist and misogynist Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is so extreme that he is banned from attending Turning Point USA events. Yes, the same Turning Point that endorses the Great Replacement theory, Nick is too extreme for them. And Marjorie spoke at his conference in 2022 and defended it initially, saying in part that she won't cancel others in the conservative movement, even if I find some of their statements tasteless, misguided, or even repulsive at times. Now, by the end of 2022, she finally condemned Fuentes after he met with former President Trump for dinner, that's also true, and claimed that she was ignorant about who Nick was and what his views were. Okay, this is a woman who routinely calls Democrats pedophiles and evil. Years ago, she liked a comment on Facebook that said a bullet to the head would be quicker in reference to Obama and Hillary Clinton. And right after the assassination attempt, she tweeted this: "We're in a battle between good and evil. The Democrats are the party of pedophiles, murdering the innocent unborn, violence, and bloody, meaningless, endless wars. They want to lock up their political opponents and terrorize innocent Americans who would tell the truth about it. The Democrat Party is flat out evil, and yesterday they tried to murder President Trump." Not only is she a celebrity still today in MAGA spaces, but she was also one of the featured speakers at this week's Republican National Convention. But perhaps one of the most blatant examples of extreme rhetoric leading to extreme outcomes is when thousands of Trump loyalists who falsely believe that the election was stolen thanks to a fire hose of blatant misinformation from Trump, his lawyers, right-wing media personalities, and hundreds of bad faith actors on Twitter stormed the Capitol building. A noose was erected to hang the vice president. People were literally pillaging through offices searching for Nancy Pelosi, and a prayer to Jesus thanking him for the opportunity to take back the country was given. People died. Officers were brutalized, and our democratic process of certifying the election was stopped for the first time in American history. Years later, despite the obvious violence fueled by the blatant and objectively false misinformation that Trump and the right-wing media world has spewed, have they toned down their rhetoric or stopped promoting a false theory? Not even a little bit. In fact, shortly after a federal judge, appointed by Trump by the way, dismissed his classified documents case this week, Trump wrote the following on his Truth Social account. As we move forward in uniting our nation after the horrific events on Saturday, this dismissal of the lawless indictment in Florida should be just the first step, followed quickly by the dismissal of all the witch hunts, the January 6th hoax in Washington, D.C., the Manhattan DA's zombie case, the New York AG scam, fake claims about a woman I never met, a decades-old photo in a line with her then-husband does not count, and the Georgia perfect phone call charges. The Democratic Justice Department coordinated all of these political attacks, which are an election interference conspiracy against Joe Biden's political opponent, me. Let us come together to end all weaponization of our justice system and make America great again. And there you have it, friends. Lie after lie after lie. This is the same man that has tweeted out images of violence and calls for violence towards political rivals. Here's a picture Trump shared of a truck bumper painted with the mural of Joe Biden being bound and gagged. Here's another he shared calling for military tribunals for Liz Cheney. By the way, military tribunals are military courts designed to try members of enemy forces, not political opponents in the same country you occupy. And just to drive home the point, Michael Flynn, a major Trump ally and political figure in the MAGA world, was gifted a gun by a church in July of 2021. And here's what he said when he got it.
So we were trying to come up with a rifle that we thought was appropriate for a general. So we went with the old school woodland camouflage. So anyhow, this is one of our top quality guns. And
maybe I'll find somebody in Washington, D.C.
Maybe I'll find someone in Washington, D.C. I could spend a long time here unpacking a church giving anyone, let alone Michael, a gun as a gift, and then erupting in applause when he says he should find someone in Washington. Was there a call to tone down the rhetoric from the MAGA world? No, there was not. Flynn tours the country daily, espousing this rhetoric. And if you want a deeper dive, you can go back to this episode with Amanda Tyler, who actually went to his event. I'll also link it in the show notes for all of you on podcast. See, for years, the temperature has been steadily rising. No doubt, if you go on Twitter, you can find someone identifying as a progressive or leftist using extreme and violent language. In fact, you can find some people even now on the internet going viral for saying things like, I wish the bullet didn't miss. But that's why I chose key leaders and not just random Twitter accounts or random celebrities who actually have no real impact on the tone and rhetoric of their followers. For just a second, imagine if a major Democratic figurehead or progressive Christian was gifted a gun and made the same comment that Flynn made in a church. Not only would the right-wing world be outraged, justifiably so, there would be a chorus of people on the other side, including me, joining them. It's outrageous. It's not okay. It's why I'm joining them now decrying the assassination attempt and telling you this is bad. We should not be trying to assassinate former presidents or people running for office. Now, some might be arguing that language like Trump is a threat to democracy or making comparisons to the propaganda being employed by Trump and his allies to the early beginnings of Nazi Germany are too far. I strongly disagree. Or to quote Ben Shapiro, facts do not care about your feelings. There is actual data, real data, to support why Trump is a threat to democracy. Not only did his supporters literally stop our democratic process, Trump continues to lie about the results of the 2020 election, cozies up to authoritarians such as Viktor Orban in Hungary, has echoed Hitler-like sentiments when he said that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. And now Trump denies knowing he was echoing Hitler, but honestly, two things. One, if you didn't know that you were echoing Hitler and were then made aware of it, I would expect you to profusely apologize and perhaps do some soul searching. He has done neither of those things. But number two, I just don't believe him because Trump lies about everything. Literally, he lies more than he tells the truth. There should be no incentive to believe what he says unless it can be verified. When people say that Trump or Trumpism or Christian nationalism is a threat to democracy or to the country, these are not hyperbolic statements. They're rooted in real data, and we've covered this time and time again. Project 2025 would fundamentally reshape how our government operates. Listen for yourself what the man behind the organization, the Heritage Foundation, that is behind Project 2025, said.
But number three, let me speak about the radical left. You and I have both been parts of faculties and faculty senates and understand that the left has taken over our institutions. The reason that they are apoplectic right now, the reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Yeah. He said we are in the middle of the Second Great American Revolution, and it will remain bloodless if the left allows. Do you think right-wing pundits have condemned such a statement? No, they haven't. In fact, the Heritage Foundation is one of the biggest sponsors of the RNC event happening again this week. This is why more than one thing can be true at the same time. It is precisely because of our commitment to non-dehumanization and a pluralistic democracy that we can say what happened to Trump is wrong and bad and should never happen again, while also saying that Trumpism is a threat bigger than the man himself. And so obviously, the man should not be killed. The threat needs to be defeated at the ballot box. I've often heard it said that for the world of Christian nationalism, accusations are too often confessions, and I think this is apt here. Broadly speaking, these worlds operate completely differently. The world of MAGA and Christian nationalism runs on dehumanization, violent language, and actually believes that political violence is fine when they believe it's justified. For proof of this, look no further than Matt Walsh tweeting the following. All of this shit about how there's no place for political violence in America is a dodge, a way of condemning the assassination attempt in the broadest, most indirect way possible, and it's not even true. America was born in political violence. There are times when political violence is justified. We wouldn't exist as a nation without it. No nation would, in fact. What made the assassination attempt against Trump so evil is that it was not morally justified. Trump is not the wicked, despotic tyrant they pretend he is. They don't want to admit that, so instead they just condemn political violence as a category. And there you have it, friends. The quiet part out loud. I do agree with Matt on something here. America was born in political violence. Yeah, it was born in the political violence of colonization, race-based chattel slavery, and a legacy of maintaining white supremacy throughout its existence. Matt is actually telling on himself here because who exactly gets to decide when political violence is justified? Is it Trump? Is it Matt Walsh? Is it their side? This is precisely why they will openly tolerate, if not celebrate, the insurrection while condemning the assassination attempt, despite both needing to be condemned in the strongest words possible, and safeguards need to be put in place to make sure neither happens again. But Trump has been clear that he would pardon January 6th defendants, calling them prisoners of war or hostages. See? It's not actually about the value of non-dehumanization, it's about the outcome. It's a completely different way of thinking, and it will use violence for its benefit no matter what. In this case, Trump's assassination will be used as proof that the evil left is the true villain, and that the media has been stoking the fires for years by calling out the true and factual points that Trump threatens democratic norms in unprecedented ways, and that he has an army of Christian nationalists with literally $1 billion war chest ready to take over America to make it a so-called Christian nation again. Look at what's happening in Louisiana with the mandate of the 10 Commandments being posted in public schools, or the superintendent of Oklahoma, Ryan Walters, snapping his tyrannical fingers and mandating that public school teachers teach children from the Bible, using the turmoil stoked by an inexcusable assassination attempt to then vilify people with valid and real concerns, while at the same time not extending the same courtesy when it happens to your political opponents, is precisely how propaganda works. And this is one of the reasons why I strongly condemn anyone who really believes that Trump getting assassinated would somehow be a good thing. First, we don't kill people, so no. But two, it would only prove their point and be used to further violence against all the people they claim are destroying the country. Militia groups are on a hairpin trigger, waiting for the right excuse to take back their country through force, and killing their strongman would be the excuse that would cause untold levels of violence towards our most vulnerable and marginalized neighbors. So please, for the sake of your humanity and the sake of the humanity of your neighbors, please do not be that person saying crazy shit like that on the internet. It helps no one. This picture of Trump is iconic, and there's no way around it. It will further cement among Trump loyalists that he is their strongman who can't be destroyed by the deep state. Remember, as of this recording, we have no insight to the motives behind this shooter, but I will tell you what we do know. The shooter wasn't an illegal immigrant. He wasn't a gang member that snuck in over the border. He wasn't gay or trans. He wasn't black. And as far as we know, he wasn't indoctrinated by the far left, quote, woke institutions of higher education. He was a 20-year-old white man. He has more in common with Kyle Rittenhouse than he does the people Christian nationalists and right-wing media tell you to fear. It is precisely because of our allegiance to a non-violent Jesus that compels us not to celebrate an assassination attempt or wish that the bullet hit its intended target, but instead to mourn and grieve, demanding that we carve a better path forward that promotes the human flourishing of all of our neighbors. It's why we're so angry that every day we see the death toll of Palestinians continue to rise with no end in sight, including a horrible story of a Palestinian man with Down syndrome who was mauled to death by an Israeli attack dog in front of his mother. I've read this story so many times and I've wept over and over again. I've asked myself, what level of hate must you have for the other that allows you to watch your dog kill a man with Down syndrome? Dehumanization is the road you walk to get there. It's why we are furious that gun violence is ravaging our country and killing children. It's why we are loud about the threat of Trumpism fueled by Christian nationalism. And it's why we fully denounce assassination attempts. The road to all of this is the road of dehumanization. We mourn with Corey's family that his life was taken far too soon. I am grateful Trump was not killed, and we are happy to hear the other two victims are going to make a full recovery. And at the same time, we will continue to warn everyone of the very real threat that Trump and the cycle of chaos he has created poses to our neighbors and to our nation. The only path forward is rooted in the humanization of the other and an invitation to do better. We love our enemies by telling the truth and inviting them to repent of their hatred, supremacy, and their thirst for power. Their distorted beliefs claim that America will fail if they're not at the top and in charge. But both the facts and our feelings tell us clearly the opposite is true. There is plenty of room and there is wisdom in diverse perspectives. We need each other to form a more perfect union. I would love your thoughts on this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. If you're listening on podcasts, shoot me an email, podcast@thenewevangelicals.com. Would love to hear from you. Talk to you all on Friday when April and I recap the RNC convention and I'm sure have more details. Talk soon.